Welcome to a brand new episode of the Corn Nation Overreaction Revisited. Here on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform. I'm your host, Greg Mahochko, and this dashing gentleman right here in the backwards ball cap, you know him, you love him. He's Mr. X's and O's, and he keeps us on our toes. I don't know where I was going with that, but I'm proud that I got some measure of a rhyme out. Haas Reuter, my friend, how are you?
Well, I'm doing pretty well tonight, Greg, and you know, you might have a future as like the next Dusty American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, with that little rhyme that you put on there.
Well, let me see now.
Hard times.
I got a hard times. Son of a plumber, baby.
Yep. So I read he has the one where he's like, I have wined and dined with kings and queens and slept in alleys and dined on pork and beans.
I mean, we could. Well. That's a whole other podcast. Getting into favorite wrestling promos. I would love for, I don't care if it's a coach, I don't care if it's a player, to come out and at some point just cut a wrestling style promo. I feel like Ty Robinson might be the guy. But
Jeff Brom from Purdue did when he was playing quarterback in the old XFL.
I remember. But that was also, that old XFL was geared towards
wrestling.
I mean, it was owned by the WWF at the time, and it was an alternative football product. But they weren't putting actual names on the backs of the jerseys. They were like beat 'em up, and they had he hate me. There was it was a different era. Tommy Maddox came out of that league, and then all he did was set things up for Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh. But hey, we're actually going to have an alternate football championship game this weekend in St. Louis with the UFL.
Are you going to go see Adrian Martinez?
It's Father's Day. I'm not going to go.
It's football. It's Father's Day, and you like football. If
it was the Battlehawks who just lost to Adrian Martinez, no, I take it back. They lost. Crap, I can't remember now. I can't. I've slept since then. I didn't watch the game. In 2020, I took my boy, 2020, he was my only. We went to the Battlehawks home opener at the Dome, and it was a lot of Kroenke sucks along the concourses because that was the first game that St. Louis had back since he pulled the Rams out of the city. It's nice to have championship football back in St. Louis. I do wish that the Battlehawks were playing, but Adrian Martinez is looking pretty good at this level. I don't think it's – yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's going to be enough to catapult him to the NFL. But who knows? A.J. McCarron parlayed his efforts last year, and then he ended up on the Bengals for a little while.
Right.
But you know that he I think he loves being in the XFL or UFL because gives his kids an opportunity to actually watch him play rather than riding the bench. But more football, it's a good thing, and I bet every player who's going to be playing in the game this Sunday is glad that it's in a climate controlled environment like the Dome, and not in Birmingham, Alabama, or San Antonio in the middle of June, where that's not a time when football is usually played. And so there'll be a lot of happy football players. Just we're inside. There's air conditioning. So,
speaking of air conditioning, should we talk about the reason why we're here today? To recap the game that mercifully we watched it in air conditioning.
Saturdays are for pain and sadness. And I know what people are thinking, Greg, it's not Saturday. I said, no, but this game was played on a Saturday, and this game brought pain and sadness both to me. And Husker fans all over. Nebraska hosted Michigan in Memorial Stadium Saturday, September 30th. It was a 2:30 kickoff, which meant it was prime time for heat. And Michigan, who would, of course, go on to win the national championship, beat Nebraska on the Tom Osborne Memorial Field there, or whatever the hell it's called, 45-7. Hoss, 45-7. My first question for you before we get into the specifics is, when you watched that game, did it look like Michigan would be a team that would go on and win the national championship?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was fairly evident that the gap between where we were at and where they were at was about as wide as it could get. Like we got dominated from the start in that game.
And I understand that, but if I'm going to try to ask this question delicately, if the talent gap was that far apart, would you not have expected Michigan to win like 70-7?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because when you first were getting ready to say 45-7, I was thinking about the final score and thought that game may not have even been as close as 45-7 looked. You know?
Did Harbaugh? I mean, he took his foot off the pedal.
Yeah, I think
it's the gas in the.
They went up 28-0 in the second quarter on a JJ McCarthy touchdown run, and at that point they just kind of coasted from then on out. And you know, when you're struggling to move the football through the air and on the ground against a team, you're not going to have any success. It wasn't a case of like Michigan was able to shut down our running game, but we had a good enough passer at quarterback to, you know, move the ball through the air. We were pretty dead in the water in this game.
I mean, we can take a little look at the stats here, but I mean, let's run into that scoring summary. So the first score happens with 9 minutes and 20 seconds left in the first quarter. It was a 29-yard pass from McCarthy to Wilson.
The one that caught on the back of Isaac Gifford's head.
Right, which a lot of people were saying, oh, that can't be a complete pass. You can't call that a catch or a touchdown. But they did.
Yep.
When you go back and look at that, how outraged are you just with that call? I mean, was it the right call? Could it have been called differently, or was it just a tremendous football play? And if Gifford turned around, might have been a different story.
I think it was just a tremendous football play. Okay. And if Gifford would have turned around, it would have been a different story. I'm sure someone out there remembers Tyrone Prothro for Alabama back in the Mike Shula era, 2005. He had a catch off the back of I believe it was a Florida DB's helmet. Kind of not quite in the back of the end zone, but caught it on the back of the helmet and rolled into the end zone. So, you know, it's one of those things, it's kind of the weird sloppy shit that tends to happen against Nebraska, where teams just pull shit out of their ass, you know. But yeah, that one kind of set the tone on what might be a weird day. And that, if I recall, that opening drive for Michigan was also when Deshaun Singleton got hurt, knocked out for the season.
Let me double check here. I guess they won't really show that, will they? There's nothing on the play-by-play breakdown that'll discuss injuries, I guess. It was you look at that. I mean, Michigan came out that entire first drive. And in fact, might have been, I don't know, the entirety of the game. That first drive, though, no huddle the entire time.
Yep. They just went down the field, mowed down the field.
And, you know, Blake Corum had his, I guess, typical afternoon. You know, we'll get into some of these statistics. I don't know. What's your opinion? And I guess it's hard to say, because not only did he beat us handily, he went on and won the national championship, and now he's in the NFL. But, like, J.J. McCarthy, why do I get the sense that he's the Tom Brady? And I'm not trying to necessarily, but like he's a I don't want to say like that he's not dynamic, but he's a game manager.
That's a fair assessment based on what he put on tape at Michigan. But I also think Michigan was just so talented up front and with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards that they didn't really need to worry about throwing the ball too much. They had some really good receivers when they did, whether it's Roman Wilson, this year. You know, in the past they've had guys like Nico Collins, but I think J.J. McCarthy's a good quarterback. Personally, I think he's going to do really well in the NFL. Good mix of mobility, good arm. He's accurate. So, but he just wasn't asked to do much.
Mm-hmm. And again, when you have that much talent around you, you don't have to try and figure out you don't have to be an Adrian Martinez who's trying to do everything.
The entire offense.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, another thing too about Michigan is I think those are some of the better offensive lines, the ones that Michigan's had the past 3 years. Some of the better offensive lines that college football's seen recently. So, you know, they really controlled and dictated the game to their opponents.
What's your opinion again, very quickly? We're not here to dwell on J.J. McCarthy, but of course he drafted by the Vikings, the 10th overall pick, I believe. Yeah. And he's going to be the backup to Sam Darnold. Now, how long do you think that lasts? Does it last the entire rookie season? Because Sam Darnold is not dynamic at all.
I think it'll last the entire rookie season, actually. Okay. I think Sam Darnold being with Kevin O'Connell at Minnesota is actually a really good matchup between play caller and quarterback. And I think that you could probably see a similar jump but you know, I don't know if you're a Rams guy. You know, I know you're a Steelers fan, but you're a St. Louis area guy. Mm-hmm. That first year for Jared Goff with the Rams looked terrible. But that second year in 2017 made a big jump, and that was under Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell, you know, as the quarterback's coach. So
was that after Fisher got fired, right?
Yeah, Fisher got fired at the end of 2016, and then McVay took over. Because I remember watching Goff as a rookie, and he just looked like an absolute dumpster fire.
Mm-hmm.
Quarterback. And now he's turned into a very serviceable, you know, probably a tier 2 guy in the NFL, probably not quite in that top tier of quarterbacks. But McVay, Kevin O'Connell, that offense, you know, because what Minnesota runs is still very much that McVay offense. It just really opens things up for a quarterback, simplifies things. And I still think Darnold probably has some of the better tools physical tools that a quarterback could have that we've seen in the past, you know, 5, 6, 7 draft classes, whatever. His disservice was getting drafted by the New York Jets.
That's not doing anybody any favors.
No.
So less than 2 minutes and 5 seconds after that first touchdown, Michigan scores again. This time it's Mullings with the 20-yard rush. They take a 14-0 lead. Early in the second quarter, you have McCarthy's 21-yard touchdown run. And later in the final seconds, really of the first half, you had Wilson with a 16-yard touchdown reception from McCarthy. McCarthy, you know, definitely left his stamp in the first half of this game. They didn't need to trot him out a whole lot in the second half. It was Blake Corum, and I mean, look, let's be honest, it was all Michigan until the final 4.5 minutes when Fleeks had the long touchdown. I think he might still be running a 74-yard touchdown run. Looked like it was a one play drive, 11 seconds. Probably hurts his 40-yard dash time a little bit there. But Nebraska's only score. They end up losing again 45-7. I mean, what is if Nebraska avoids Michigan State, they avoid Oregon and Washington and Ohio State, right, and Penn State all this year.
Mm-hmm. No, we have Ohio State.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because you anticipate or predict we'll be 7-0 going into that game. Knock on wood.
There you go.
But the fact that we have 19 starters returning, and we have some really solid experience coming back on the defensive line. The offensive line had to, replace, I'd say maybe minimal parts of that. and I know it's tough to see because we haven't seen it in actual full speed action, but I mean, how are we going to close the gap, from like offensive line, defensive line play from like a Michigan? Are we going to close that gap, or have we closed that gap a little bit in this offseason?
I think that we've closed that gap a little bit this offseason. I think you could even make a case that we closed that gap a little bit by the end of last season, because by the end of last season, the offensive line actually was not playing that badly.
Right.
We just didn't have a quarterback that could not turn the football over, essentially. But I think that while we may not have closed the gap all the way up to Michigan and Ohio State, I think that it'd be a little bit more appropriate to say that we maybe closed the gap up to the level of like what Penn State is at right now.
Okay. I don't think you'd find too many Husker fans that were upset with that comparison.
If you're categorized as being one of the top 4 in the conference, in terms of, frontline play, I think we'd all be pretty happy.
Well, before we start rolling sound, you told me that for this game, which was, by the way, September 30th, 30 days has September, June, and November, last day of September, and you were offered a ticket to this game.
I was.
Yeah. And tell me, or tell listeners what you told me about your response when offered a ticket to this game, because most Husker fans aren't turning down a Husker, a memorial ticket. But give the circumstances, and you're like,
Well, I knew that we were going to lose, first and foremost. Like, I try to be like, I give you shit for being such a Kool-Aid drinker in our preseason prediction show, but at the same time, like, you also know me. Like, when it gets to Thursday, Friday game week, like, I'm like, you know what? By God, we might be playing the '85 Bears tomorrow, but we're gonna find a way.
That's right.
Like, hope springs eternal. Like,
of course,
that's what the fans all about. But not for this game. Not for this game.
Again,
Saturdays are for pain and sadness.
Yeah, this one in particular.
And so I had a good friend of mine offered me, an extra ticket that he had for the game. And they were good seats. And I was just basically on the order of saying, fuck no. Like, sorry, man. But, like, I don't want to go watch us lose, one, because even though I know that we're going to lose, I'm still not going to be happy about it.
Right.
I was watching it at home, and I was still dropping F-bombs, getting mad. And, like, I know that we're going to lose. The other thing, too, it was 93 degrees on September 30th. That is against the law. Law of nature, whatever you want to call it. That is just flat out wrong. Like, the last time it should be 93 should be, like, at latest September 10th.
I thought you were going to say Labor Day. So.
No, like, yeah, Labor Day was brutal last year, too. But, yeah, like, I was just like, this heat, like, I'm sorry, when we joined the conference and you think Michigan at Nebraska, Big Ten football, you're thinking it's a brisk 42-degree day in late October, November, steel gray sky. No, there's not a cloud in the sky, and it's 93 degrees. And so you know what I did for that entire second half? I sat on the couch and drank Shiner Box and just sat there watching the game, like just, kind of just in terms of trying to amuse myself of like, okay, who's actually worth a damn on the field right now for us? That's very cynical, of me, but, it was a rough day.
We've been in the Big Ten 11 years now?
No, I think it'll be 15 years this year. 15 seasons.
All right, so let's go back to, like, the Big 12 days. You would expect Nebraska going down to Texas Tech at the end of September to maybe pull a 93-degree.
Yeah.
That seems – well, you and friend of the show, Josh, who was griping because today he said it was 90 degrees or something.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm sorry. I don't have any control over it. I wish I did. Because here's a
God-given right to complain about the heat in this game.
So I'm the opposite. I don't complain all summer long, so I can bitch about being cold all winter long.
See, rarely will you hear me bitch about the cold.
Well, you and I are two very different. I don't like being cold. And here's the thing: I don't even mind it. It's not so much the cold. I don't like snow and ice.
See, I will go to a cold weather football game. Get my gear on, just be like, to quote Jocko Willink from the Jocko podcast, it's good operating weather.
Well, and that too is when, if it's Memorial Stadium, and for this game here, let's see, I saw 87,000 some odd people there, 87,134. When you're surrounded by that many warm bodies, you're inclined to just warm up a little bit. The difference is, I would take your 93 degrees all day long, because the game we'll talk about next week, when Nebraska went to Champaign to take on Illinois on a Friday night, the wind was coming right at me, and I was in a hoodie, so I was kind of underdressed. My boy was underdressed because he was in a hoodie too. But we'll talk about that next week. But give me that 90. I'd have been loving the 93 over the cold wind we had coming right at us, but it was at Champaign, and Friday night games. I mean, I know we'll talk about it this fall. The Illinois Nebraska game this year is going to be on a Friday night in Lincoln.
93 degrees.
But because it's a Friday night in Nebraska, where high school football rules, it'll be a sellout, but might not be a turnstile sellout, so to speak. If it's cold and breezy, there might be some chilly folk up there. But Nebraska said, well, we'll never host a Friday night game, Friday nights in Nebraska or for high school football. This seems to me, tell me if I'm wrong, the logical solution to this is just move the Friday night or the high school games up to Thursday night.
That's probably what will end up happening, I would say. And, yeah, we were pretty firm on we're not hosting a Friday night home game until this year, when we're pretty much the homecoming game for every single opponent we play on the road.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's go ruin some folks' homecoming. Let's
piss off some people.
Yeah.
We got a lot of opportunities.
I want to say another thing about the Michigan game.
Yeah, I was not done, but yeah.
Okay. This game, this predates the sign stealing scandal. Connor Stallions, Jim Harbaugh, stealing opponents' signs with advanced scouting in person and all that. After that story broke, I think at about October 20th, I think it was around that time that story started trickling out. I immediately thought of our second offensive drive of this game, because the first play of the game we get picked off. Mm-hmm. The ball gets batted up in the air and is picked off. But on the second drive, we drive all the way into the red zone, actually. And we have a 4th and inches, and we come out in an unbalanced kind of a heavy shotgun formation with 4 tight ends and Anthony Grant in the backfield and Heinrich Harburg at quarterback. And we run just a direct snap. It's basically quarterback wedge. It's just taking the ball, taking the snap and run straight up the middle, right behind the center. And the offensive line tight ends are all wedge blocking. And we hadn't run that all season, hadn't shown any indications of it. And it was one of those moments where it was just kind of like, damn, they must have had a bead on our signals from the sideline and decipher, they must have figured it out somehow, because it was just something that was very it was uncanny, let's put it that way.
Their ability to pick up.
Yeah. And, even though some people might say, well, aren't you contradicting yourself, Haas? You said it was an unscouted look. How could they ever see, how could they have picked it up? It's like, if you have enough of somebody's signals, you can start to piece together more signals. You can start to piece together what they might do, anticipate, especially with personnel.
And also, it's pretty naive of anybody to think that, when Michigan got caught was the first time that they had done it. This is for all things in this world that are claimed to be institutional. Like, this was habitual by Michigan.
Well, if we're going to rewind a little bit and talk about another Nebraska-Michigan game from, 2021, the last time we played the Memorial Stadium.
Breaking my heart.
That, I'm going to say a few things about that. One, they must have not had our signals then, because Scott Frost was on a heater play calling that night. Like, that, I've been pretty, brutal on Frost, as
Critical.
a caller, critical. But that was probably his best play calling he's ever had at Nebraska when he was the head coach here. Things were just coming up aces, whether it was a little throwback screen on the first drive to Ramir Johnson, the delayed wheel route, the leak play to Ramir for a touchdown, the reverse swing pass to Levi Falk, I think it was, or Wyatt Lewer for a touchdown. Frost was on one. Second of all, that was probably one of the best crowds I've ever been a part of at Memorial Stadium. I mean, it ranks up there with 06 Texas, 08 Colorado, 09 Oklahoma. It was a really hostile environment. You know, even though Harbaugh said he knew that they were going to win the entire time, he said some comment like that in the post game. It's like,
of course he did.
Come on, man. Like, anyone who was in that stadium knew that you probably were puckering up there a little bit there, Jim.
Well, you know, looking at rewinding the calendar back to 2021, yes, Michigan outgained Nebraska in total offensive yardage, 459, but Scott Frost and that offense still put 431 yards up. Yep. And by the way, with 21 less plays.
And we didn't have much of a running game, like a traditional run game.
Right. We averaged 7.2 yards per play, Michigan 5.7. Again, Nebraska, you know, Michigan had one fumble but recovered it. Nebraska had two fumbles and recovered one of them, and we all know the one that didn't get recovered is the one that doomed Nebraska. But I'll look.
That game was brutal to take. Like, you know, even though we went 3-9 that year, and I had a feeling we weren't really very good by the time we played Michigan that year, I woke up the next morning feeling like we had just lost like the 2009 Big 12 championship game. Just, you know, felt sick about it.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like I say this quite a bit, you know, like, well, I'll die on that hill. Apparently there are a lot of hills that I'll die on, but one is that there's no way that the officials should not have blown the whistle, you know, to you know, kill that play before they did. It's like they were waiting for
something to happen.
You
know, what's even worse is it was a quarterback. It was a split zone concept. So the offensive line was blocking zone to the right. Travis Vokalek was coming back across the formation to slice, you know, kick out the defensive end. And Adrian Martinez, if he bounces the ball one gap wider outside of Vokalek's block, because the block, he's kind of engaged with the defender's inside shoulder, trying to get to the inside shoulder, and the defender's kind of wrong arming and squeezing the play down. If he goes for the outside shoulder and Adrian bounces it around there, it's probably a 70-yard walk-off touchdown to win.
Yeah.
You know, or close to a walk-off. But, yeah, it was a great environment for that game. What did we rush for?
Well, so I want to address that. Nebraska – as a team, had, I don't know if I can say, I'm going to say 2 plays. It might be more depending on, you know, when Adrian Martinez, well, you've said before that even if the quarterback is the runner by design, if they get brought down behind the line of scrimmage, it's considered a sack, right?
Yep.
Okay. Nebraska in the entirety of the game, and let's go back to, again, 60 offensive plays. They were brought down behind the line of scrimmage twice. There was a 3-yard sack, and what I can only imagine was a jet sweep or something where Xavier Betts got brought down for a loss of 1.
Yeah, Jacques Yant missed the arc block on the jet sweep.
So Nebraska netted 140 yards on the ground that day. Michigan, meanwhile, I mean, they still had Blake Corum. They had Hassan Haskins.
I thought Hassan Haskins was better than Corum in that game.
He was. I mean, statistically, he had 2 touchdowns to 1, had 123 yards to 80, you know, versus 89.
That game was they'd get into 3rd and 2 so many times against us, and we had a really good defense in 21. But they'd get into 3rd and 2, and they would just get 3. I mean, they would just displace Damian Daniels or Ben Stille or Ty Robinson just enough to pick up 3 yards.
Right.
And that game, you know, they kind of – it was a slow bleed, you know.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. I mean, I know Haskins, he popped a couple of big ones, but for the most part, really, he had to grind it out.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that loss, that one hurts, you know.
But to compare it to, last fall against Michigan, obviously different circumstance. Nebraska was never in this contest. But I mean, outside of me and the people who really, really, really like the Kool-Aid, that would not have been unexpected, I don't have.
Greg, that Kool-Aid's sweet, but it'll rot your teeth, my man.
I brush my teeth after. It's fine. It's good. No, but I think the most interesting thing is we didn't know how the college football playoffs would end out, or I mean, we had a pretty solid understanding, at least at the time, for the last several years, that when it got to Indianapolis and it got to the Big Ten championship game, the East Division was going to win because Iowa wasn't, Minnesota wasn't, Wisconsin couldn't, even at their best, they couldn't hang with like the Ohio States. So that was kind of, and then, I mean, you get to that, the last year of the 4-team playoff, and, what was it? It was, I got back, Michigan, obviously, Washington, Jordan, Alabama.
Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama.
Alabama. And I think everybody expected Alabama to do more than they did. And then Texas, I think there's always that national perception that, well, if it's the SEC, then they're just going to mow. I'm sure there were plenty of pundits, and I didn't watch at the time, or if I did, I don't remember, who were saying, well, it's the current SEC versus the future SEC for the national championship, being Alabama versus Texas. And it was the opposite. It was Big Ten. So suck it, SEC. Suck it, Paul Feinbaum, I guess is what we're trying to say.
Suck it, Trebek.
Yeah. Oh, may he rest in peace. And Pat Sajak retired.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he died. I was like, what?
Well, just two icons of our youth.
I was never a big Wheel of Fortune guy.
My this is a huge sidebar. My grandpa was a big Vanna White fan. And like back in the 80s, as a legit Christmas present, like when, I don't know how frequently this was done, but somebody mailed to the studio. Anyway, my grandpa received an autographed Vanna White poster.
Dang.
There's a picture of me as like a little kid and grandpa holding it up, blushing as could be, but that just fun memories.
Got a big old Cheshire cat grin too.
Pretty shit eating, yeah. And I don't know how the hell we got. It's your fault. You said suck it, Trebek.
I feel like I should start antagonizing John on the 5 Heart podcast when I'm on, similar to the Sean Connery and Celebrity Jeopardy.
That'd be perfectly. That'd be welcome. Yeah. Anytime you want to come on.
Can I wrap up a thought on Michigan though?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much more other than we got our asses handed to us, and we have upgraded across the board in a lot of key places and have a lot of key guys back to where, losses like that, lopsided losses, I don't think should happen anymore.
Well, I don't think my prediction's still 10 wins. We play in Indianapolis.
Yes, but I have it written down.
Michigan, I don't think is a contender for the conference championship. They lose way too much. They might even be entering into their Frank Solich era. Who knows?
Ooh.
But I think that Ohio State is going to beat Michigan this year, and I think that it's not even going to be close.
Do you want to take a look at their schedule with me?
Yeah, let's do it.
So they open up at home August 31st against Fresno State.
They'll win.
Then they are, and honestly, I don't know if this is neutral site. It doesn't say. I'm just assuming, but they play Texas on September 7th.
It's in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Then it's against Arkansas State on the 14th. Then it is, I guess they're at home against Southern California On the 21st, on the 28th, they are home against Minnesota. So that is 5 home games in a row, if Google's to be believed. And this is from Google, not I could have gone to their website. Their first road game isn't until October when they go to Washington. Talk about a rematch.
I could see them 3-2 heading into that Washington game.
Ooh. They're on the road against Illinois on the 19th, so they have the 12th off.
They won't lose to Fat Bert.
No. They won't lose to Michigan State on the 26th, I don't think. November 2nd against Oregon could pose a problem. Then they have Indiana on the 9th of November. They're off on the 16th. They finish up against Northwestern, and then the game on November 30th. So
8-4, 9-3,
which is crazy. Is that? I don't think Nebraska has a necessarily easy schedule. Is it just?
I don't think so either. Ours just sets up so well. It's top. It's
top heavy.
Top heavy.
Top heavy with, and full disclosure or full what's the word I'm looking for? Confession or whatever. Anyway, our non-conference game or our bigger non-conference game is not, Colorado is not Texas. No. They have 2 games against teams that were in the college football playoffs last year. So,
and then Oregon, that is going to be
wild.
That's a tough game for them.
I guess those new schools are kind of rotate in. Like we'll have UCLA, USC this year, and maybe next year. Do we have the other 2? Or I haven't looked that far ahead.
No, I think it's next year. We have them still, but they're flipped. So we'll go to UCLA next year, and USC will come to Lincoln. And
then maybe we'll pick up the other 2. Kind of.
I can't wait to go to a game at Oregon, Nebraska at Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to possibly get slipped something that you'll die from in Oregon, since everything's illegal out there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, die in a forest fire or something.
No, because you got Smokey on your side, and only you can prevent forest fires. Yep. But watch out in Oregon, because everything's legal in Oregon, and that's not anyway. All right, let's close the book on Michigan 2023 because going forward, it's going to be a different story. And we're going to go forward. And next week, we're going to talk about that Friday night game against Illinois in Champaign. And, I can't wait to tell you all about freezing and getting free hot chocolate and free pretzel for my boy. It's going to be – and a win. The play early on that broke Illinois. I'm so excited to talk about all that and just the atmosphere of that game, how the wind left the fans' sails very early on, and Matt Rule and company were able to – Matt Rule through his team were able to impose their will for the remainder of that game. So it's going to be a lot of fun
I think it's the Illinois game where he did the "if we die, we die."
Is that? I thought that was it. I thought that was the following week. You know who would know? Minnie. I'll ask Minnie. She would know. That's her favorite Matt Rule line to date.
You know what my favorite Matt Rule line is?
What's that?
A warrior needs no weapon. A warrior is the weapon.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. You should put that on your MySpace homepage.
maybe I'll add that to the tattoos.
Well, there you go. That'd fit perfect in there, right in here.
Right,
a warrior needs
state of Nebraska and the Grateful Dead lightning bolt.
Can I? We're gonna end the show. I'll tell you what I was gonna tell you off air. You'll be shocked. Shocked, I say.
All right.
But it's completely irrelevant to anything else we've talked about tonight. So we'll leave it at that. For my good friend and broadcast buddy, Mr. Haas Reuter, I'm Greg Mahochko. This is Corn Nation Overreaction Revisited, the Michigan game. And look, every time it's an L, everybody's like, why are you doing that? Because it's fun. Because if nothing else, I get an excuse to sit here for 40 minutes and talk with my buddy. And we get to laugh and go back and say, yeah, we saw that one coming. but things are going to be different. That is the past.
Yep.
So
Spring's eternal.
That is right. Hope springs eternal, and we will see you next week right here on all your favorite podcast platforms and YouTube for the video version. So in the meantime, in between time, go Big Red, Hoss.
Don't stop believing.